The Russian tycoon had traveled a long way, leaving his homeland with the hope of completing some urgent business in this foreign city. The flight had been exhausting. His body ached from hours in the airplane, and his mind was tired from trying to prepare for meetings he would have as soon as he reached the hotel. All he wanted now was a quiet room, a comfortable bed, and a moment to catch his breath. He pushed his suitcase through the grand entrance of the hotel, which gleamed with marble floors and tall, sparkling chandeliers. The place looked perfect, but he already felt a knot in his stomach. This wasn't going to be easy. The tycoon approached the reception desk with a polite smile, but his limited English made it hard for him to explain what he needed. The receptionist, busy attending to other guests, tried to understand him, but her patience was thin. She misinterpreted his gestures and his broken sentences. The tycoon wanted a room that was quiet and away from the elevator because he had a meeting that evening and needed to prepare. But the receptionist thought he was being demanding and maybe even rude. Her brow furrowed, and she glanced at her manager, unsure how to handle him. Other guests were watching silently, noticing the misunderstanding and whispering among themselves. Some even rolled their eyes, thinking he was simply a difficult person who expected special treatment. Carrying his suitcase, the tycoon followed the receptionist's directions to the elevator, trying to remain calm. Inside the elevator, he pressed the button for the top floor and waited, his mind racing. He thought about the presentations he had to give and the emails that needed to be answered. He felt trapped between the stress of his work and the irritation of the hotel staff. Each ding of the elevator only reminded him of the time slipping away and the challenges that awaited him in this unfamiliar city. When he reached his floor, the tycoon struggled with the room key. The door seemed stuck, and when he finally managed to open it, he realized the room wasn't exactly what he had asked for. It was noisy right next to the elevator, and the view was blocked by scaffolding from ongoing construction. He sighed quietly, not wanting to draw attention, but his disappointment was clear. He tried to explain again to the front desk, walking back with his suitcase and hoping someone would finally understand him. At the front desk, the receptionist now looked annoyed. She was trying to juggle multiple guests and had no idea how to handle this man who couldn't communicate properly. Another guest waiting in line tapped his foot impatiently and muttered under his breath. The tycoon felt a flush of embarrassment. He wasn't used to being judged before anyone even knew him. He wanted to explain that he wasn't being difficult. He just needed quiet and comfort to prepare for his important work. But no words came out that could bridge the language gap. As he turned away from the desk, a bellboy approached with a hesitant smile. He tried to ask the tycoon some questions, but the language barrier made even simple conversation complicated. The tycoon pointed to the room, shook his head, and made small gestures to indicate his frustration. The bellboy nodded, pretending to understand, but it was clear he didn't. They walked back to the elevator together, and the tycoon's patience was thinning. He was beginning to feel like nobody here wanted to truly help him. Meanwhile, in the hotel lobby, other guests continued to whisper. Some were curious, some were judgmental, but all were unaware of the tycoon's background and the reasons for his stress. They only saw a man who seemed out of place, struggling with the simplest tasks. The tycoon caught some of their glances and felt the weight of their silent judgment. It made him feel smaller, even though he was a powerful businessman back home. He realized that being wealthy didn't mean anything in a situation like this. Here, in this foreign hotel, he was just a man trying to be understood. He reached his room for the second time, and the bellboy finally left him alone. The tycoon sat on the edge of the bed, closing his eyes for a moment, trying to calm himself. He thought about how strange it was to feel so helpless despite having everything he needed in life. Money, influence, power, they didn't matter here. What mattered was communication, understanding, and patience, and those were in short supply. The tycoon picked up his phone and tried to make a call to the front desk, hoping that maybe he could explain his situation more clearly over the phone. But the line was busy, and his frustration grew. He looked out the window at the bustling city below, feeling a mix of exhaustion and isolation. He had traveled thousands of miles and faced countless challenges, but nothing had prepared him for the simple act of being misunderstood. After a few moments of sitting in silence, he decided to go down to the dining area. Maybe food would calm him, or maybe a change of environment would help. He carried himself with dignity, even though every step felt heavier than the last. As he entered the restaurant, he noticed the waitstaff moving quickly, serving tables with smiles and practiced efficiency. He felt out of place again, unsure how to communicate his order. He could see other guests enjoying their meals, laughing and chatting without a care. The contrast made him feel even more isolated. He gestured toward a table, hoping someone would notice and assist him. A waitress approached, speaking in English, but again, his limited vocabulary made it difficult to order. He tried pointing, making small gestures, and using a few words, but nothing seemed to work. The waitress looked confused, asking questions that he couldn't answer clearly. The tycoon's frustration built up inside him, but he took a deep breath, trying to stay composed. He didn't want to make a scene. He just wanted to eat and relax before facing the night ahead. Other diners began to notice the tension. Some whispered to their companions, trying to figure out why this man seemed so agitated. He could feel their eyes on him, but he avoided making eye contact. He focused on what little he could control, his posture, his breathing, and his patience. It was difficult, but he reminded himself that he couldn't let anger take over. He needed clarity and calm if he was going to navigate the rest of the evening. Finally, after several minutes, he was able to sit down at a small corner table. The waitress left him, still unsure how to assist, but he appreciated the effort. The tycoon took a deep breath and looked around the room, observing the simple joys that other people were experiencing. He realized that he had forgotten how much he missed these quiet human moments, the smiles, the laughter, and even the small kindnesses that often went unnoticed. As he sat there, he quietly promised himself that he would find someone who could understand him. He wouldn't give up. He had faced far greater challenges in life, and a language barrier at a hotel, frustrating as it was, would not defeat him. The night was just beginning, and he knew that soon, someone would bridge the gap, helping him feel seen and understood again. Until then, he focused on patience, hope, and the simple act of breathing in a foreign city that was both beautiful and overwhelming. And in that moment, the Russian tycoon, a man used to commanding rooms and leading companies, realized that even the strongest people sometimes need help just to be understood. After a brief moment of rest, the Russian tycoon decided to explore the hotel further. He thought maybe if he understood the place better, he could manage things more easily. The lobby was elegant, filled with soft lighting and polished floors that reflected the chandeliers above. Guests were moving around, some chatting, some checking in, others hurrying to their rooms. Yet, despite the beauty of the place, the tycoon felt a sense of unease. He was still invisible, still misunderstood. The language barrier made him feel small, even though he was a man who could command entire companies back home. He walked slowly, trying to observe everything. The front desk staff were busy, moving between guests, answering questions, and making phone calls. He noticed that they didn't look at him the way they did others. He felt their impatience and their judgment, though it was not spoken. He tried to ignore it, reminding himself that he was here for business and that this moment was just a minor challenge. Yet, the feeling of isolation lingered, and he felt his energy being drained. The tycoon decided to sit in the lounge, hoping that maybe a cup of tea would calm him. He approached the small counter where drinks were served and tried to communicate with the staff. He asked for a hot drink. Simple enough, but his accent and limited vocabulary made it difficult for the staff to understand. They exchanged confused looks and whispered among themselves. He felt the frustration rising in his chest, but he kept his composure. He had faced bigger problems than this, and yet the helplessness of not being understood was new and sharp. He observed the other guests around him. Families were laughing, friends were talking animatedly, and couples were sharing quiet moments together. He noticed the difference between his world and theirs. In his life, people were often focused on wealth, deals, and competition. Here, in this simple hotel lounge, he realized how little those things mattered. People were happy with the small, ordinary moments. Smiles, conversation, a warm cup of tea. It made him reflect on the loneliness that sometimes accompanied his wealth and influence. Just as he was taking a deep breath, a waitress approached. She smiled politely and asked if he needed anything. The tycoon tried to explain what he wanted, but again the words stumbled out awkwardly. She looked at him with a slight frown, clearly unsure how to respond. He gestured toward the kettle and tried to say the word tea, but it came out in a way she couldn't understand. The tycoon felt a tight knot in his stomach. He wanted to scream, but he didn't. He sat quietly, hoping someone would notice his struggle. Minutes passed and the tension grew. Other guests began to glance at him, curious and slightly judgmental. He could feel their eyes on him, but he focused inward, trying to calm his racing mind. He reminded himself that he wasn't rude or demanding. He was simply misunderstood, trapped in a world where words he had used for years did not have the same meaning. His thoughts drifted to his family back home, to the life he led, and to the many times he had succeeded despite obstacles. This situation, he told himself, was just another challenge to overcome. As he sat, trying to regain his composure, he noticed a small detail that others might have missed. The waitress, although confused, kept returning to him with gentle gestures, trying to understand him. She didn't give up immediately like some of the other staff. This tiny observation sparked a flicker of hope in him. He realized that someone might actually be able to help him if they were willing to make the effort. He felt a small sense of relief, though he still needed someone to understand him fully. Meanwhile, in the background, the lobby continued its usual rhythm. Guests checked in and out, staff moved quickly, and the world went on. The tycoon observed everything, trying to remain patient. He watched how people interacted, noticing the little acts of kindness and the small misunderstandings. He thought about how fragile communication could be and how easy it was for someone to be misjudged when words failed. It was a lesson he hadn't expected to learn in a hotel lounge, yet it was profound. Suddenly, the situation escalated slightly. Another guest approached the counter and complained about a minor issue, demanding immediate attention. The staff, already busy and slightly frustrated, responded tersely. The tycoon felt the tension rise again, not because of himself, but because the energy in the room shifted. People were no longer calm. Irritation filled the air. He felt a pang of anxiety, knowing that his own struggle with communication might soon be overlooked entirely. The weight of the misunderstanding pressed on him, and he felt even more alone. He closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. He reminded himself that he couldn't control the actions of others, only his own response. He needed calm and focus if he was going to navigate the rest of the evening. Slowly, he opened his eyes and scanned the room again, searching for a hint of understanding, someone who could bridge the gap. And then, he noticed something small but significant. A young waitress, different from the others, paused and looked at him with genuine attention. She didn't rush past or ignore him. She seemed to notice his struggle and was willing to take the time to help. The tycoon felt a surge of hope. He realized that perhaps this encounter could change everything. If this waitress could understand him, she might be able to help him communicate his needs. He gestured toward her, hoping she would come closer. When she approached, he tried again, using gestures, pointing to the kettle and speaking slowly. She nodded patiently, and he could see the spark of recognition in her eyes. For the first time since arriving, he felt that someone might truly understand him. The other guests seemed to notice the change in his demeanor. He straightened his back, lifted his chin, and allowed a small, cautious smile. It was as if the tension in the room had shifted slightly. The waitress, seeing his relief, responded with a warm smile of her own, signaling that she was willing to help, to listen, and to understand. The tycoon felt a wave of gratitude. He realized that even in a foreign city, surrounded by people who didn't speak his language, human connection was still possible. As the evening went on, he and the waitress continued to struggle with words, but there was patience, and there was effort. Every small success felt like a victory. The tycoon ordered a simple meal, and for the first time since arriving, he felt some sense of comfort. He reflected on how quickly judgment can arise when communication fails, and how easy it is to feel isolated even in a crowded room. Yet, he also learned how a single person's attention and care could make a profound difference. By the end of the evening, the tycoon felt a mix of exhaustion and relief. The challenges of the day had tested him, but they had also taught him the value of patience, humility, and hope. He returned to his room, carrying not just the weight of his work, but the knowledge that understanding could be found in the most unexpected places. The young waitress, attentive and kind, had reminded him that even in moments of misunderstanding, human connection could shine through, offering comfort and support when it was needed most. He settled into bed, thinking about the small acts that had changed his experience, the willingness of someone to listen, to try, and to care. It reminded him that no matter how powerful a person might be, everyone needed to be understood. As he closed his eyes, he drifted into sleep with a sense of cautious optimism, knowing that tomorrow might bring even more challenges, but also opportunities for connection and understanding. The next morning, the Russian tycoon woke up feeling a little more hopeful than the day before. The previous evening had been tiring, but there was a small comfort in knowing that someone at the hotel had tried to understand him. He got dressed carefully, thinking about the meetings ahead, and decided to start his day in the hotel dining area. Maybe breakfast would be simple, maybe it would help him gather his thoughts before stepping out into the busy city. As he entered the dining room, he noticed the usual morning rush. Guests were chatting over coffee, waitstaff moved quickly from table to table, and the smell of fresh bread and hot dishes filled the air. The tycoon felt a little anxious, knowing that communication could be difficult again. But then he saw her, the young waitress from the previous evening. She was arranging the tables and smiling as she worked. When she noticed him, she gave a small nod, acknowledging him without rushing, and he felt a sense of relief. Here was someone who had remembered him, who had cared enough to pay attention. He approached her and tried to explain his breakfast preference, speaking slowly and using gestures. She listened patiently, not interrupting, and even tried repeating the words in a way he might understand. They both smiled at the effort, and it felt like a small victory. The tycoon realized that human connection didn't require perfect words. It required patience, attention, and care. The waitress brought him a simple breakfast exactly as he liked it, and he felt a quiet joy in this small success. It reminded him that understanding could be built slowly, with effort and kindness. While eating, the tycoon observed the other guests again. He noticed their conversations, their laughter, and the casual way they interacted. He thought about how often he had been in rooms full of people, yet felt isolated. The power he held at home couldn't always buy comfort or understanding. Here, in this hotel, he was learning something different. Empathy and patience could create more connection than wealth ever could. It was a lesson he hadn't expected to learn from a simple hotel breakfast. After finishing, he got up and prepared to leave for his first meeting. He had a driver waiting, and as he stepped out of the hotel, he felt the weight of the city around him. The streets were busy, the sounds unfamiliar, and he felt the same quiet tension he had felt since arriving. But he reminded himself of the previous night and morning, the small victories, the patience of the waitress, and the moments of understanding. It gave him courage to face the day. He spent the morning in meetings, negotiating and presenting his ideas. He was confident, skilled, and experienced, yet he couldn't shake the small frustration from the hotel. The memory of being misunderstood still lingered. He realized that in life, success wasn't just about achievements or wealth. It was also about being recognized, being heard, and being understood. It was something simple yet profound, and it had been missing during his first hours at the hotel. By midday, he returned to the hotel, feeling both tired and restless. He wanted a quiet moment, maybe a cup of tea, before continuing with his work. As he entered the lobby, he saw that things were as busy as ever. Guests came and went, staff moved quickly, and the energy was constant. The tycoon carried himself with dignity, but there was a faint tension in his shoulders. He remembered how difficult communication had been and wondered if he would face more challenges today. The waitress noticed him immediately. She approached with her usual calm and attentive smile. He gestured toward a table and tried to explain that he wanted a quiet place to sit. She nodded and led him to a corner where it was peaceful. The tycoon appreciated the thoughtfulness. In a busy environment, small gestures could make a world of difference. He realized that the staff often didn't notice the little things that could make someone comfortable, but she did. As he settled at the table, he reflected on the events of the last day. The misunderstandings, the patience, the small victories, they all formed a pattern. He realized that every person in the hotel had a life, challenges, and perspectives of their own. Just as he had felt misunderstood, he recognized that others might feel the same in different situations. It gave him a quiet sense of empathy. Being wealthy or powerful didn't shield anyone from misunderstanding or frustration. Human connection required effort, understanding, and sometimes a willingness to listen beyond words. While he was thinking, the waitress brought him tea. She smiled, and though their words were limited, there was an unspoken understanding. The tycoon felt gratitude, not just for the tea, but for the acknowledgement, the attention, and the patience. He realized that the simple act of being noticed, of being understood even in small ways, was deeply important. He reflected on how often people overlooked this in their daily lives, rushing past others without thought or care. After finishing his tea, the tycoon prepared to leave for another meeting. Before stepping out, he thanked the waitress. His words were few, but his tone carried sincerity. She smiled, understanding the gratitude even without a long explanation. The interaction was brief, yet it left a lasting impression. He realized that sometimes words were not necessary to convey meaning. Attention, patience, and genuine effort could speak louder than any sentence. Later in the afternoon, he returned to the hotel once again. The lobby was still bustling, and the tension of the first day seemed to linger. Guests were checking in and out, some chatting, some moving quickly. The tycoon carried a sense of calm now, built from the understanding he had received. Yet, he noticed how easily misunderstandings could arise. A staff member misinterpreted another guest's request, and he watched the situation escalate briefly before being resolved. It reminded him how fragile communication could be and how easily patience could be tested. The young waitress approached, recognizing him immediately. She guided him to a quiet spot and helped him with a small request he had about his room. It was a minor issue, but her willingness to help made a big difference. The tycoon appreciated the consistency of her attention. It wasn't just one act of kindness. It was repeated effort that showed care. He reflected on how meaningful this was, especially when surrounded by people who often ignored or misunderstood him. As evening approached, the tycoon decided to have dinner in the hotel restaurant. He was tired from the day but wanted to end it on a positive note. The waitress greeted him warmly, remembering his preferences and guiding him to a table he liked. This small act of thoughtfulness made him feel at home in a foreign place. The dinner proceeded smoothly, and for the first time he felt a sense of peace. The misunderstandings that had plagued his arrival seemed distant now, replaced by quiet comfort and understanding. While eating, he observed the restaurant around him. Guests were engaged in conversation, smiling, and enjoying their meals. Staff moved efficiently and kindly. The tycoon noticed that small gestures, attention to detail, and genuine effort could transform an environment. He reflected on how the world often overlooked these small things, chasing bigger achievements and goals, forgetting that human connection was the most important aspect of life. He felt grateful for the lesson and for the person who had helped him experience it. After dinner, he returned to his room. He sat for a while, thinking about the day and the events that had unfolded. The challenges of communication, the patience of the waitress, and the small victories all formed a narrative he would remember. It reminded him that empathy, attention, and understanding could make even a foreign and busy hotel feel like a place of comfort. It also reminded him that even powerful people needed to be seen and heard, just like anyone else. Before going to sleep, he looked out the window at the city lights. The streets were alive with activity, and the world continued its rhythm. Yet, he felt a quiet satisfaction. The small acts of understanding he had experienced had transformed his day. He realized that sometimes, it was not wealth or power that changed situations, but patience, care, and human attention. And in that realization he found peace. The Russian tycoon drifted into sleep with a sense of hope and calm. The challenges of the first day and the small victories of understanding had taught him an important lesson. He knew the next day might bring new trials, but he also knew that someone would be there, ready to bridge the gap, ready to help him be understood, and ready to remind him of the power of human connection. The next day, the Russian tycoon awoke with a sense of determination. He had learned from his previous experiences at the hotel that patience and small acts of communication could make a significant difference. He dressed carefully, checked his schedule, and stepped out of his room with a quiet confidence. The hotel was already alive with morning activity. Guests were moving about, some with purpose, others leisurely, and the staff were preparing for the busy day ahead. As he approached the lobby, the tycoon noticed the usual hustle and bustle. People were chatting, luggage was being wheeled across the marble floors, and the scent of fresh pastries filled the air. He kept his composure and observed, remembering how quickly misunderstandings could arise. He wanted to approach the day with calm, prepared to navigate both work and communication with care. The young waitress from previous encounters noticed him immediately. She gave a warm nod and a polite smile, acknowledging his presence. The tycoon returned the gesture, feeling a quiet reassurance. He realized that her attentiveness had become a small anchor in an otherwise chaotic environment. Her patience and willingness to understand him were more than simple service. They were acts of kindness that gave him confidence. He approached her and explained, with gestures and simple words, that he needed assistance with his room and some arrangements for the day. She listened attentively, nodding, and made sure she understood his requests. Even though the conversation was slow and limited by language, there was a mutual respect that made communication easier. The tycoon felt a growing sense of gratitude and a sense that the day could proceed smoothly. As the morning continued, the tycoon needed to handle some urgent tasks. He had calls to make, emails to respond to, and documents to prepare. He returned to his room briefly, and the hotel's quiet corridors allowed him a moment of reflection. He thought about the challenges of the previous days and how a simple act of attention from one person had changed his experience entirely. It reminded him that the human connection was often more powerful than wealth, influence, or efficiency. Returning to the lobby, the tycoon saw the staff managing the flow of guests. One situation caught his attention: a guest struggling to explain a special request in broken English. He noticed the staff's impatience and the subtle tension that had formed. The tycoon realized how easily misunderstandings could escalate and how important patience was in creating a comfortable environment for everyone. It gave him a renewed appreciation for the small acts of effort he had received from the waitress. When it was time for lunch, the tycoon returned to the restaurant. The waitress greeted him warmly and led him to his preferred table, remembering his choices from previous meals. The consistency of her attention brought him a quiet sense of relief. He realized that understanding didn't always require perfection in communication, but a willingness to pay attention, to notice, and to act kindly. It was a lesson that resonated deeply. While having lunch, the tycoon observed the interactions around him. Guests were laughing, sharing stories, and enjoying simple pleasures. Staff moved with efficiency, but he noticed small moments where patience and care made a difference. A server adjusted a chair for a guest. Another brought a child a small treat. These little gestures reminded the tycoon of the importance of human connection. He reflected on how easily these small actions could go unnoticed, yet how deeply they impacted someone's experience. In the afternoon, he returned to his room to prepare for a video call with colleagues. The hotel's quiet atmosphere helped him focus, and he was able to conduct his work effectively. Still, the thought of how different his experience could have been without the help of the waitress lingered in his mind. He realized that understanding and empathy could transform even the most ordinary day into something meaningful. It was a reminder that the world was full of small, unnoticed acts that could make life easier for others. Later, the tycoon decided to take a walk in the hotel gardens. The fresh air and greenery provided a sense of calm. He observed the careful planning of the space, the way paths guided guests naturally, and how small details like benches and fountains created comfort. It reminded him of the power of thoughtfulness in everyday life. Even in a busy hotel, small acts of consideration could create peace and ease. As evening approached, he returned to the hotel restaurant for dinner. The waitress greeted him as always, attentive and patient. She guided him to a quiet table and ensured everything was arranged as he liked. The tycoon felt a deep sense of gratitude for her consistency and care. He reflected on how her willingness to listen and understand had transformed his experience from frustration to comfort. It reminded him that patience and kindness were often more valuable than any service or luxury. While eating, he noticed a small scene at another table. A guest was trying to communicate a complicated request, and the staff member seemed unsure how to respond. The tycoon realized how easily tension could arise when understanding failed. He thought about how many people, like himself, might feel isolated or frustrated in situations where language or culture created barriers. It gave him a sense of empathy for others, recognizing that everyone needed to be seen and understood. After dinner, he returned to his room with a sense of calm and satisfaction. The day had been challenging in some ways, but the efforts of a single person had transformed his experience. He realized that the human connection he had experienced was rare and valuable. It reminded him that even in a busy, impersonal world, simple acts of attention, patience, and understanding could have profound effects. Before going to sleep, he thought about the lessons of the day. Patience, empathy, and small acts of kindness could make a tremendous difference. The young waitress had shown him that understanding didn't require grand gestures or perfect communication. It required effort, attention, and a willingness to see another person's needs. The tycoon reflected on how this lesson could be applied in his own life, in business, and in interactions with people from all walks of life. As he lay down to rest, he felt a quiet gratitude. The challenges of the hotel, the misunderstandings, and the moments of patience had created a story he would remember. He realized that human connection, empathy, and understanding were the most valuable things, even more than wealth or power. The day had reinforced that one person's effort could transform another's experience profoundly. The Russian tycoon drifted into sleep with a sense of contentment. He knew the next day might bring new challenges, but he also knew that the patience and care he had experienced would guide him. The lessons of human connection, understanding, and empathy were clear in his mind, and he felt prepared to face whatever came next with calm, patience, and a renewed sense of appreciation for the people who made a difference in his life. The final day of the Russian tycoon's stay at the hotel began with a quiet calm that he had not felt when he first arrived. The first few hours of his journey had been filled with frustration and misunderstanding, but now he had experienced the power of human attention and care. He dressed carefully, checked his notes for the day's meetings, and left his room feeling prepared and patient. He was determined to make the most of his last day at the hotel, knowing that the small acts of kindness he had received could shape how he approached not just this day, but many days ahead. Entering the lobby, the tycoon felt the familiar hum of activity. Guests moved in different directions, staff attended to various needs, and the atmosphere was alive and busy. Yet, he no longer felt overwhelmed. He carried a sense of calm and focus that had developed over the past days. He noticed how small moments, such as a guest being guided politely or staff remembering a preference, made the environment smoother and more pleasant. It reminded him how much the little things mattered, both in hotels and in life. The young waitress approached him almost immediately. She greeted him with a gentle nod and a warm smile, as if silently saying, "I understand you." The tycoon felt a sense of relief and gratitude. In a place where he had once felt invisible and misunderstood, her attention made him feel seen and acknowledged. He realized how rare and valuable such human connection was, especially in a world that often rushed past others without thought. He gestured to a table in a quiet corner, and she guided him there efficiently, anticipating his preferences as she had over the past days. The tycoon appreciated her consistency and attention. Even though words were limited, the understanding between them grew stronger with each interaction. It reminded him that sometimes actions spoke louder than language, and a single person's effort could transform an entire experience. He reflected on how much this small kindness had affected his stay and his mood. Throughout the morning, the tycoon prepared for a crucial video conference that would determine the next steps for his business. He needed focus and concentration, and the hotel's peaceful environment, supported by the attentive staff, provided just that. He appreciated that the world did not revolve around him, yet here someone had taken the time to notice his needs. It gave him confidence and comfort, knowing that even in a foreign place, understanding could exist. After completing his work, he decided to take a brief walk through the hotel corridors and gardens. The sunlight filtered gently through the trees, casting shadows across the manicured paths. He observed how carefully the spaces were designed, with attention to detail that made the hotel not just functional but comforting. He thought about the parallels to life. Small acts, careful attention, and consideration for others created harmony, whether in a hotel or in human relationships. As lunchtime approached, the tycoon returned to the restaurant. The waitress greeted him as usual, remembering his favorite table and ensuring everything was arranged just as he liked. She brought his meal with a smile, and the tycoon felt a wave of gratitude. It was not just about the food. It was about feeling understood, respected, and cared for. He thought about how small gestures like this often went unnoticed but had a powerful impact on someone's experience. He realized that empathy and attention could turn frustration into calm, isolation into connection, and misunderstanding into understanding. During lunch, he observed other guests and staff, noticing the small moments of care that improved everyone's experience. A child was offered a small treat by a server, an elderly guest was helped with a chair, and staff quietly coordinated to ensure smooth service. These simple acts reminded the tycoon that kindness and patience could ripple through a space, improving not only one person's experience but the atmosphere for everyone. He felt a quiet sense of joy, recognizing the importance of these small, human-centered actions. After finishing his meal, the tycoon decided to visit the front desk. He wanted to ensure that any remaining arrangements for his departure were clear. As he approached, the receptionist tried to assist him, but he noticed the slight tension and misunderstanding in her expression. Before he could become frustrated, the young waitress stepped forward. She smiled at him and quietly translated his requests, bridging the gap between him and the staff. He felt a profound relief, understanding that her presence and attentiveness had once again made the difference. It reinforced the lesson he had learned over the past days. Patience, effort, and care were invaluable. As the afternoon continued, he packed his belongings and reflected on his experience. From the moment he had arrived, struggling with language and misunderstandings, to the calm and clarity of the final day, he had undergone a subtle transformation. The challenges had reminded him that wealth and power were not always sufficient, and that even the most capable person could feel isolated without understanding. Yet, a single person's empathy and attention could create a ripple of comfort and clarity that changed everything. The young waitress approached once more, offering a quiet nod and a warm smile. The tycoon expressed his gratitude, this time in simple words that conveyed sincere appreciation. Her eyes reflected understanding, and there was no need for more explanation. They had shared a connection that transcended language, built on effort, attention, and kindness. It was a reminder that human connection was both simple and profound, often existing in the smallest of gestures. As he prepared to leave the hotel, the tycoon paused at the entrance to look back one last time. He noticed how the staff continued their work, managing the lobby with efficiency and care. Guests moved about, some unaware of the quiet impact of attention and patience. Yet, he understood how powerful such actions were. He felt grateful for the lessons he had learned, and for the human connection that had transformed his experience from frustration and isolation to understanding and comfort. The driver arrived to take him to the airport. As he stepped into the car, the tycoon reflected on the past few days. The hotel had been more than just a place to sleep. It had been a stage for learning about patience, empathy, and human attention. The young waitress, with her simple acts of care, had reminded him of the importance of understanding others and being understood in return. He realized that such lessons could not be bought or commanded. They could only be experienced through attention and effort. During the ride, he thought about how he could carry these lessons into his work and life. The importance of listening, noticing small needs, and responding with patience and care was universal. Even in the fast-paced, high-pressure world he came from, these qualities could make a significant difference. He felt inspired to lead with understanding, to value human connection, and to recognize the impact of small gestures. At the airport, he prepared to board his flight, feeling a calm satisfaction. He had faced the challenge of being misunderstood in a foreign environment and had found resolution through human kindness and attention. The experience reminded him that no matter how much one achieves, everyone needs to be seen and understood. He thought about the young waitress and the staff who had tried to assist him, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. They had made his stay memorable, not through luxury or grandeur, but through empathy, patience, and genuine effort. As the plane took off, the tycoon looked out the window at the city below. He reflected on the lessons of his journey. Understanding, patience, attention, and kindness were more powerful than wealth, more enduring than influence, and more impactful than any material comfort. He realized that in every encounter, in every interaction, these qualities could transform an experience and touch lives in profound ways. The Russian tycoon settled into his seat with a sense of fulfillment. He had come seeking comfort and efficiency, but he had left with a deeper understanding of human connection. He knew that the lessons of patience, empathy, and small acts of care would guide him long after he returned home. The story of the hotel, the misunderstandings, and the young waitress would remain with him as a reminder that attention, understanding, and kindness could change lives in ways that wealth and power could never achieve. And in that quiet reflection, the tycoon smiled, knowing that he had been reminded of what truly mattered. The simple act of being understood had brought him comfort, the patience of one person had brought him peace, and the human connection he had experienced would continue to inspire him in all the days to come.